So for the next 2 weeks, we will be focusing on different classifications of psychological disorders. So today we have a super short lecture about just what are psychological disorders in general. We don't have any vocab words today, so you don't need to worry about writing any of those down. And really, we're just going to talk about being able to identify and define a disorder. So the big question is, how do you distinguish between and define normal and abnormal? So abnormal generally is considered a deviation from normality. So therefore, what is normal? And normal is perceived as whatever most people do. So deviation is considered abnormal. It's moving away from what most people do. The major problem with this, though, is might doesn't make right. The people that do the same thing all the time aren't necessarily it's not the right way to do it. So one of the examples that I saw recently was just because a lot of people cheat on their taxes doesn't mean it's right, which is a really adulty example to give, but it's the one that popped into my head. So people go through adjustment, and ideally, if you are in the quote-unquote normal category, that is just a group of people that are able to go out into the world and participate in it. So you can participate physically, emotionally, socially at a pretty standard level. How that looks is different for each person because we are all unique and we're never going to do everything the same way all the time. So normal is can you go out in the world and successfully participate? Abnormal are the people that cannot go out into the world, they don't adjust to whatever it is, and they cannot participate successfully. However, there's another issue with this as well. This view does not consider social norms at all or cultural issues. So what is quote-unquote normal for one group of people is not always normal for somebody else. So we can't really look at social interaction as the only way to define normal versus abnormal. So really it gets down to looking at and evaluating psychological health. So this is looking at mental illness versus mental health. Carl Jung and Abraham Maslow, so we talked about Maslow a lot, looked at this idea of self-actualization, attaining your highest ideal, becoming really, truly yourself. However, the question with this is, how do we know if I'm truly myself? How do I know if that person next to me is truly their self? How do you evaluate that? And it's important to note that they stress that you can't just label somebody mentally ill because they do something that you perceive as odd, right? There has to be some other defining way to go about this. And really all that we've done up to this point is explain that, hey, it's kind of hard to explain what is normal and what is abnormal. So in 1952, what we have is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, so the DSM. And this was produced by the American Psychiatric Association, and every so often it's updated. We are in the 5th edition now. And rather than having a bunch of words on the slide for you to read over, what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to watch this brief lecture, brief video from, I think it's SciShow on Psych, which is by the same people that do the crash course. And they will explain the history of the DSM. Really for this class, you don't need to know the nitty-gritty of defining each mental disorder. So we're not going to get into that. Just if you understand the basics of what the DSM is and its history, that will be sufficient. So our main idea today was that psychologists draw the line between normal and abnormal behavior in practice by looking at various attempts to define abnormal behavior adjustments and psychological health. Remember, if you have any questions, send me an email at brittany.dambro@lansingschools.net. Have a great day.